Thanks very much, Mike, for being here and for hosting us on behalf of Learning Times. And thank you all for joining us in the audience today for this webinar on the required elements of an education-focused mission statement. My name is Greg Stevens. I'm the Assistant Director for Professional Development here at the Alliance. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter and our special guests who will take over the stage in a couple of moments. First is my colleague Donna Tversky, who is my counterpart in the accreditation program. Hi, Donna. Thanks for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Hello, everyone.
And in a few moments, we'll be hearing from a couple of our guests, including Daniel Veneciano, who's the director of the Sheldon Museum of Art at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Hi, Daniel. Welcome.
Hello.
And we'll also be hearing from Charlie Walter, the Executive Director of the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science in my hometown of Albuquerque. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
Glad you're here with us, Charlie. And we'll be hearing from our colleague Mamie Gasparez in a little bit. She's a bit delayed getting online, but we hope that she will be joining us shortly. At this moment, I'm going to turn the stage over to Donna, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Core Documents Verification Program as the framing device for this program. Donna.
Thank you, Greg. Today's webinar is one in a 5-part series related to the Core Documents Verification Program. This new program is one step on the continuum of excellence, as you see displayed on your screen, circled in red. The Core Documents Verification Program helps museums keep documents up to date, and through an outside review of your documents provides accountability and confirmation. It distinguishes your museum as a professional member of the field and an educational entity, and it streamlines your path towards accreditation. Because a museum's mission statement, I'm sorry, I'm trying to advance to the next slide, but it may take a moment. Because a museum's mission statement is vital to its sustainability, it has been designated a core document. And I'll just take a moment to try and advance. Oh, here we go. So what is the Core Documents Verification Program? After 40 years reviewing museum documentation in the accreditation program, the Alliance identified 5 documents that are fundamental for basic professional museum operations because they embody core museum values and practices for every museum, regardless of size or type. These documents codify and guide decisions and actions that promote institutional stability and viability, which in turn allows the museum to fulfill its educational role, preserve its treasures for future generations, and be an enduring part of its community. The required elements for each document, which we talk about a little bit later, are all based on the standards. And the 5 documents include an educational mission statement, institutional code of ethics, strategic institutional plan, emergency disaster preparedness and recovery plan, and the collections management policy. Our purpose in developing the program is to confirm that an institution has an educational mission and the policies and procedures in place that reflect standard practices of professional museums as articulated in the national standards and best practices for U.S. museums and used in the accreditation program. We anticipate many museums will use the core document verification as a launching pad for accreditation, as part of the implementation of MAP recommendations, or for third-party vetting of documents created as part of earning STEPS certificates. So, Greg, I believe I turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Donna. I appreciate your overview of that program. And for those of you who have participated in any of the other Core Documents webinar series webinars, you'll recognize a familiar format, but we're hoping that we find these all very useful. Today's program, of course, will focus on the required elements of an education-focused mission statement and why your institution should have an education-focused mission statement. We're going to review some of the various processes that our presenter colleagues have used to develop a mission statement at their institutions, and then provide you with some key resources to help you do this process. Obviously, we want you to emerge from this program being better able to determine if your museum's mission statement is indeed education-focused, determine if your mission statement meets national standards, to access those resources to help you create or strengthen your education-focused mission statement. So with that said, I'm going to turn the stage and the microphone back over to Donna Torsky, who's going to talk about the essential elements of an education-focused mission statement. Donna.
Thank you. And speaking of essential, a mission statement is the beating heart of a museum. It articulates the museum's educational focus and purpose and its role and responsibility to the public and its collections. Some museums choose to also develop vision and value statements as a way of extending the concepts expressed in the mission statement. These are very different but related guiding documents for the museum. The mission statement is purpose, vision is future, and values are beliefs. A good mission statement is succinct and powerful and articulates an organization's purpose and how it makes a difference for the benefit of others. A mission statement drives everything the museum does. Vision, policy making, planning, and operations are all extensions of a museum's mission. The mission gives the governing authority a foundation from which it can strategize. The governing authority sets the museum's strategic direction through the mission, which impacts the policies and plans influencing staff actions and behaviors. So would anybody like to jump in and say why an education mission statement?
Yeah, hi, this is Charlie. Let me jump in here because I had an experience a number of years ago that really, I think, points to the importance of this. To me, the most important thing is that, when the educational mission, the reason it's there, it's why your organization makes a difference. It's not really what it does, but it's about, what is the difference you want your organization to make, and specifically education. I've given a session to a number of Park Service employees from the National Park Service, the Forest Service, the State Park system, and we were chatting about this very issue. And I asked the group, I said, how many of you have education in your mission statements? And only a few, very, very few raised their hands. And I said at that time, when push comes to shove, when budgets are tight, that is when people are going to really look hard at what you do and what's important. And if it's not directly related to your mission, they may see it as something that shouldn't be there. And indeed, this happened at the state park system where I was living at the time. A colleague had spent 5 years building an education program in the state parks. And in one budget session, they just zeroed his line item out. And when you went back to their mission statement, it was all about protecting and preserving. Education wasn't there. So the two reasons. One, it's the so what of what we do. We have these great collections and exhibits. Well, so what? Why are they important? That should be there, and it will drive so much of what you do. So the strategic piece is there. And the second part is when issues get tight, people will examine your operation very, very closely, and if it's not clearly stated why you're doing this, it could go away.
And I want to add to that, Charlie, this is Greg, that I happen to notice in looking at the registration list for this program that obviously we have many directors, but we also have many directors of education and other education colleagues listening in on this program. So I encourage any of you in the audience who have any commentary related to this topic of the education-focused mission statement to contribute your thoughts or questions or debate in the chat box on the left-hand side of the screen.
Great, thanks. So I think, Daniel, you're going to take over now and go a little bit into your mission statement.
Sure. Daniel here, and we have an interesting process in developing the mission statement for the Sheldon Museum of Art. And when I arrived at Sheldon 5 years ago in 2008, you were looking at the mission statement that we had at that time. It was approved in 2006. And it was a lovely statement, very warm and welcoming, I think very Midwestern. And however, it had certain limitations, and as you can read, the Sheldon welcomes you for personal encounters with great American art. Join us for dynamic exhibitions, etc. It's a beautiful welcome statement and an invitation to join in, but it doesn't quite identify the museum for what it is specifically, and nor does it talk about education very directly either. So the process for us was then to sort of examine what other mission statements did, and I saw some that were very, comprehensive, and I'm going to advance the slide. And then in 2008, with my intervention, we created this mission statement that I feel, swung the pendulum maybe too far in the other direction, where we had probably more information than we needed to in what a mission statement might do. And so we explained all of the things that we wanted to do with the institution in that first paragraph, multidisciplinary approaches to the visual arts. And we did include here American art in its historical diversity and transnational origins. And the reason that we felt that was important at the time is that American art isn't the only kind of art we have at Sheldon. We have really an international collection, though our emphasis is American art. That's what we're known for. So how to explain what is a renowned American collection in the context of an international collection? That's what we use transnational study to make sense of that relationship. And that second paragraph talks about our relationship to our parent institution, the University of Nebraska, and as a land-grant institution, and that gives us some motivation for, thinking about serving the state at large and not just our own community. In any case, it was a bit much. So when it came time for reaccreditation in 2011, we shortened it. We used a process of thinking about our values, our vision, and leading up to this shorter mission statement. We pulled some of that information about wanting to do all these things into a vision statement of these are the things we want to do. And that allowed us to shorten the mission statement to something more manageable. So now it reads, the Sheldon Museum of Art preserves, presents, and builds its collection. That was important to constituents, giving special emphasis to American art through cultural and transnational study. The Sheldon invites inquiry and imagination in its educational offerings, contributes to the intellectual life of the University of Nebraska, and serves the needs of a diverse general public. We wanted to be more inclusive than we had been perceived in the past. So this was our way of trying to do things that satisfied the mission of the university, as well as satisfied the expectations of a community in Lincoln and even across our state of Nebraska. That's in brief. I don't know if you...
No, that's great. Thank you, Daniel. And I think what we'll do is we'll turn the stage over to Mamie to do a little comparison of the process that you went through in evolving your mission statement at your institution.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad to be here. The Herman Grima and the Gallery Historic Houses, let me get the slide right. The Herman Grima and Gallery Historic Houses, yes, that does say 1881. I'm not kidding. That really was probably before the contemporary mission statement was even a thought. The ladies of the Christian Women's Exchange, who own and operate the two historic house museums, which still exist today in the French Quarter of New Orleans, actually set forth their goals for their organization in 1881. So while that does sound kind of cute, there's a real legacy that we need to follow in interpreting who we are today. So basically in 1998, the organization set forth more as a preservation, collecting, and educating organization and established themselves as a pure museum. So you'll see that preserve, maintain, restore, and interpret, place in, and educate visitors. And very loudly, you might read at the end, 1830 to 1880. We are not exactly audience focused during this time, but we are establishing ourselves as a museum in the traditional sense with preservation, collection, education. So since 1998, you might have seen on the news, there's a little thing called Hurricane Katrina, which changed a lot of things here in New Orleans for a lot of us. And the Getty Institute actually funded almost every arts and history nonprofit in the city, especially the museums, to do a new strategic planning process. With that, those resources brought to bear, we re-envisioned who we were. And we were able to bring in focus groups and to figure out really who we were going to be for our new audience. So remember, we're a historic house museum. We don't move rapidly. We don't move speedily. But nonetheless, in 2008, we brought the legacy to bear of the Women's Exchange, as it's known now, the former Christian Women's Exchange, to continue our legacy and to preserve and collect and maintain and educate. But you'll also see that we left out 1830 or 1860, which may or may not be a compelling reason to stay with the museum or to return for a visit. One of the things I think we knew in New Orleans was that children education was such an important part of our two historic house museums, and understanding who that audience was and what we could mutually enjoy as we rebuilt our city was so important. We're probably due for a revisit of this mission statement pretty soon, because we've really accomplished a lot in our few short years of rebuilding here. But it's been a great exercise. And when you do have just a few minutes to share with someone, whether they're the board of directors or a funder or a school, I think it's important to be succinct and very powerful and compelling. So this mission statement is really the heart and soul of our institution.
So, Mamie, this is Greg. Let me ask you, you hinted that maybe it's time for a revisit, which we're going to talk about later on, and the importance of revisiting your mission statement on a pretty regular basis. What might it morph into? What might change about it?
You know, I think that we need to respect the legacy of who we have been, but we've actually done a number of new exhibits. So rather than the static historic house museum, we have changing exhibits. We have collections that we lend and we borrow. So I think that we need to seek out and really just kind of take a few moments to reevaluate who our audiences are. And not just children's education, we need to really understand that we aren't just the talking head guided tour. We're more of a traditional museum in terms of developing audiences or seeking funders and supporters and friends. So I think it's just time to take a look at that. We've done an awful lot of growing since 2005 at Katrina, so I think that's where we're going to head, reevaluating our audiences.
Great. Thanks, Mamie. And I know, Charlie, at your institution in Albuquerque that you have gone through a similar process, but your process seems to focus on what you called wordsmithing.
Right. Well, it was interesting. Excuse me. I've been here 2 years, and it was a great time to arrive because we had just received some feedback on an accreditation visit from the visiting committee. So my first day on the job, I walked in, and the Secretary of Cultural Affairs for the state of New Mexico, that's who I report to, she sat me down and showed me a letter from AAM, and it said, well, you know, we've been through your institution, all this, but we're going to table your accreditation for right now, and here's some questions. And one of the most significant questions was, what kind of museum did we really want to be? Because this was the mission statement that you're looking at now that was in our accreditation packet, and it's about fostering an understanding and appreciation of the diverse natural history and physical sciences of New Mexico and the Southwest. Well, as the accreditation reviewers walked through our institution and then reviewed some of our other core documents, they said very clearly, they said, you're really not meeting your mission. You're a great dinosaur museum, and your exhibits stop at the Ice Age, and I'm interpreting a bit here now that I've been here and can look at it. Our exhibits do an amazing walk-through time of New Mexico, but there's nothing about current natural history. And a position had been frozen by the state just due to budget issues, and that was our biology curator. That position had not been filled in like 3 or 4 years. Well, I had 3 paleontologists on staff, and the exhibits were all paleontology. So it was a great question, and it said, what do you want to be? Just tell us. You just need to be clear about who you are. And so from that initial mission statement, we transformed into this one. And as Greg mentioned, a big part of it was looking at each word, looking, what is natural history? What is our goal as far as interpreting, collecting, educating? And I love the language, as Mamie said. There's some really bold language in both her and Daniel's mission statement. Mamie had this, continue the legacy, or we dare to make a difference. And Daniel, we invite inquiry and imagination. And that's what we try to do here. In ours, we want to ignite a passion for lifelong learning. I mean, this is what we have. This is the foundation for everything we do, and it's a yardstick. So as we talk about exhibits now, it's a matter of, okay, does this exhibit ignite a passion for lifelong learning? What does that mean to you? How can we do a better job of that? So you can tell it's a lot briefer, but we looked at each word, and I think I'll talk a little bit more later about that process itself. But it was very clear to myself as well when I walked in. We could have changed our mission statement and said, the New Mexico Museum of Natural History interprets the prehistoric record of our amazing state, and we could have left it at that. There's nothing wrong with that. But talking to the community, talking to staff, volunteers, everybody across the board wanted a broad natural history museum here in New Mexico, and it let us know we weren't doing our job well enough. And so crafting that mission statement, and then we have now set out, based on this statement, a 3-year strategic plan. And of course, a big part of that plan is how do we provide more balance to natural history and show current issues of water, energy, biodiversity, climate change, things like that really weren't here, and that's helping us achieve our mission in a better way.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. Well, we have a couple of questions for you that we wanted to ask of the audience, and these might be seemingly silly questions for you, but we decided to ask you, first of all, does your institution have a mission statement, or at least that you know of? And it looks like there's a couple of people who are, most everybody has an institution with a mission statement. So then the next critical question is, since we've been talking about this, is your institution's mission statement education focused? So this might be the juicier question of the two to ask. And I'm wondering if Donna or any of our colleague presenters have any comments on what you're seeing here, based on your own experience in your institutions?
Yeah, I think people need to understand about the transforming of the field, and probably, as Mamie was talking about, back in the 1880s, it was enough to say, hey, we're preserving this place for future generations. We're preserving it. So that became a strong focus, and many of our collections started because we wanted to preserve history, science, art. But I think we're more sophisticated now, and this is what I feel AAM is really helping the field with, is saying, so what? You have these amazing collections, so what? Well, education, educating our communities is of the highest importance. And so I think that's just part of the growth and shift in our field.
We've seen a huge paradigm shift towards the visitor experience. And Daniel, you and I were having a conversation yesterday that for you it goes beyond the visitor experience. It's much broader than that when we talk about education.
True. I will say one thing first in support of Charlie's point about this. I think that, museums have just sort of assumed that education was part of what we do. It's why we preserve, and build collections. But we don't make it explicit, and it helps our communities, our legislators, everybody to better understand the kinds of service that we provide as museums, that they are educational in nature. And sometimes we just have to spell it out. And that, I think, is a strategic move in order to, I think, concretize our relevance in society. And that's what comes into question at times. As for your question, Greg, about service, for me, one of the things we talked about is audience-centered movement that has been, I think, prevalent in museums in the last few years, the last decade more, really. And I go back to, that mission statement where I refer to the land-grant institution that the University of Nebraska, is, and that it has a responsibility to provide a kind of statewide service. And I use that to motivate what the museum can do, even though we are an art museum. The sense that we can provide service beyond our walls. So it isn't just about the audience that steps into the museum and how well we serve them with programs and education, etc. But how well we can step outside, go down our steps and into the community and into the state and provide programs beyond our walls. And that's what I think of as the kind of mission of a land-grant institution that museums, I hope, will begin to consider more and more.
Thanks, Daniel. And I wanted to circle back to a comment, or actually a question for Mamie, coming from my colleague Jill here in Washington, D.C., who wants to know if you used the 2008 version of your mission statement to connect to some of the rebuilding efforts that were happening in New Orleans at the time and shortly after Katrina.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great question. 2008, the storm was 2005. By 2008, a lot of us were still struggling. We had significant demographic trends. So many people had fled the city for a variety of reasons. Some fled right after the storm, and then a lot left by choice. So we had some changing demographics, but then we started to realize that there was really a brain game. There were just wonderful, bright young people who wanted to move to New Orleans and make a difference. And so I think that we found the emergence of the new educational system in the city was just something we could connect with. An emergence of a charter school system, which is just incredibly stellar at this point, and literally the rebuilding of a lot of other schools that some of them had been flooded out, but others had huge changes to their student enrollment. So we had consolidation and change. So I think, and this is a good AAM lesson, one of my accreditation lessons was community engagement above all else. So how do you help? If we are expanding beyond our walls, which I totally agree with, then we need to figure out how to help the system get better. So we send our educators out into the classrooms. We invited other schools to come in, whether we got scholarships or sponsorships, and we were able to really leverage that and come up with a few unique experiences that were cross-curricular. In fact, we have a really cool archaeological dig in one of the courtyards of the Historic House Museum. And it's become a signature program. Schools are looking for it. It's an experience that you can take math and art and writing and the humanities, but it all stems from the science lab. This is such a great program, and it makes it so much fun for all the kids in the schools. And so we were able to refocus who we were by not just saying we're about 1830 to 1860. We're about a service organization that's going to go from the past into the present and into the future. So it's been fun too.
Well, as you're talking about that, I'm looking at a couple of comments that have come in, one from Carrie and another from Simone, who would like us to better define what we mean by the word focused in the context of an education-focused mission statement. And Simone is asking if there are specific criteria or words that capture an education focus in the mission statement.
Yes, there are. And, you know, I don't think that's one of the things that I enjoy so much about museums is that we're known as informal learning environments. You know, there is no book on, you know, there's no book that we all follow in a linear way to get to who we are. We're all unique institutions, and we're all in unique communities, and so the expression of that comes out in infinite ways. But again, if you look at the mission statements that we've presented today, you know, just having words like we just using the words educate, using the words inquiry, you know, lifelong learning, it's whatever works for you. And I think, you know, Randy Korn speaks really well about this. She talks about intentionality. So there's no right or wrong way to focus on an educational mission statement. And the wonderful thing about museums is it's a question for you. What does it mean to you and your staff and your community? Where is your passion? Again, I go back to Mimi's. We dare to make a difference. We dare to make a difference. And again, Daniel, you know, we're inspiring inquiry and imagination. So what words speak to you and your staff and your community? And that's the innovation of it all. You know, you may do things that have never been done before, but it's the bottom line is it's the so what. So what? You know, we're all about collecting, preserving, exhibiting, you know, programs. So what? Well, you know, again, at my institution, it's inspiring lifelong learning around science and natural history. We want to inspire you to be a lifelong learner and have that spark happen here. So that's just my 2 cents.
Right, and I'm looking at Cheryl's comment, Cheryl Taylor, who asks, do you agree with the notion that just because a mission statement contains the word education doesn't necessarily mean it is education focused? And my point of view is that it doesn't, just because you put the word in there doesn't mean you're actually living up to your mission. And some of the ways that we've been talking about redefining education might be more meaningful than just dropping in the word because it seems right.
Yeah. And again, that's one of the wonderful things about the accreditation process. The 2 big questions accreditation reviewers are going to look at your institution are, number 1, how well are you meeting your mission? And that gets right back to what Greg said. So if it's in there, accreditation reviewers are going to see how you're expressing that mission. How are you doing it? And the second thing, of course, is how well do you meet national standards? And that's those other documents that Dana showed us early on.
Well, to that point, let's go ahead and keep your comments and questions coming in, please. And I'm going to turn the stage back over to Donna, who's going to talk to us about some of those required elements in your mission statement. Donna.
Thank you. So these are, hang on just 1 second. So these are the field-wide standards that everyone's been alluding to in their discussion of their mission statements. They're disseminated by the Alliance, but they are generally accepted levels all museums can achieve. The standards in plain language, and what you're seeing there is the formal language, but the standards in plain language simply mean know what you want to do and why it makes a difference to anyone. Then, of course, put it into writing so that you can share it, and then stick to it. So as Greg was saying, just because you have the word education in there, you might not be living it. So sticking to it is part of living it. The required elements, every institution is different, and every mission statement should reflect that. And you've heard that from everyone. But there are several items that all of you should include in the mission statements. The museum's mission statement should be influenced by its history, its community, collections, and its governance. Interrelated policies and plans contribute to a cohesive vision and mission. So the required elements should be educational in scope, describe the institution's unique purpose, unique focus and role, and be approved by the governing authority. So typically, a mission statement explains the museum's purpose and reason for existing. Sometimes it will address audience and impact. A museum may look to other mission statements as a helpful starting point, as you are doing today, for drafting and discussing its own. But in order to create a strong foundation for everything the museum does, the mission must be specific to each museum. Mission statements are only useful if they're being realized every day, if you're actually using them. A good mission statement leans towards societal impact rather than simply an explanation of operations. Transitioning from being about something to being for someone is what Stephen Weil would say in Daedalus. So create a review team and outline the review process. Museums might consider who to involve in this process and how they will contribute to the review. Do research. Museums may find it helpful to do research on where they came from, on their origins and history, to explore how purpose has evolved over time. I think Meme did that. Look at the current mission statement. Missions do not always need to change, but it is important to recognize when they have to. The strengths and weaknesses of the current statement can be considered in order to determine what types of revisions are required. Does it need just a few tweaks, or does it need a complete rewrite? And get feedback. While the museum statement review team will lead the process, feedback from other stakeholders is also essential. Broad input from board, volunteers, staff, and other stakeholders can push thinking to explore why the museum is a vital part of the community. It is wise to capture this feedback verbatim. Input from many people can build excitement and passion, which is the mission statement should reflect. And then refine the mission. The team can use the feedback collected to start drafting the statement. Drafts can go to stakeholders to refine the mission, make it more succinct, more powerful over time. However, writing the mission cannot become the mission of the museum. It is important that missions strike the fine balance between getting the necessary input needed to create a strong mission, but then move forward, acknowledge it, believe it, and live it. Consider also writing vision and value statements at this time. Finally, send the final draft of the mission statement to the board for formal approval. This can be accompanied by an explanation of the process and the decisions made throughout the process. Integrate the new mission statement into planning efforts, into your policies, documents, and publications. At this point, it would be prudent for the museum to consider documents needing revisions in order to reflect this new mission. These documents can be revised as needed and distributed to key stakeholders. So I think I'm going to turn it over now to Mamie to talk about the Herman Grimme and Gallier historic houses.
Well, and before I let Mamie start, I want to let the audience know that as our colleagues are describing their process for recreating their mission statements, we hope that you will think about sharing your own experience. And after Mamie, Daniel, and Charlie are done, we're going to ask you to share your process. So maybe be thinking about how you might communicate that to our colleagues in the audience. Mamie, your turn.
Absolutely. This was really a fun project to take on in 2008. I will give you a little background and how old we are. It's 1881. The current board members are the granddaughters and the great-granddaughters of the original ladies. So again, things don't move particularly quickly. A lot of them felt like we were almost too small to go through such a business-like exercise. But I will tell you that the end result is that the board has effectively passed the torch to the next generation with confidence. That dialogue, that conversation was so amazing. But how did we do it? We actually started by giving everyone an assignment that they should go off and find their favorite museum that they had traveled to, or maybe one they weren't that impressed with, and then search for their mission statement. Brought them back, put it together in a PowerPoint, and then we all sat around and talked about it in large groups. We brought in stakeholders, staffers, and we, again, just started to share. One of the themes that came up is that words made you feel something. And a lot of us felt like it was important to be welcoming and inclusive rather than exclusive. And when I say that, I mean rather than 1830 to 1860, what about old 1870 over there? So we wanted to definitely warm it up because we are all about gracious hospitality in the historic house museum industry. So we kind of came up with a list of words that made us feel something that identified with things that we had been doing and we felt like we did well. So we gathered that input and then would go off into committee and then go and write and then go back and forth and wordsmith some more. So it was a lot of conversation. Again, a lot of dialogue, but the end result was that the new generation, and it was important because we had really just instituted term limits, that we had the confidence of the last board to take the reins and go forward. So that was really fun. And to come up with it, the ladies are actually very excited about doing this again. So they say that smart people learn from other people's mistakes. We had dozens and dozens of museum mission statements from all kinds of different museums. We didn't just look at historic house museums. We looked at art museums. We looked at national parks. And we really tried to think outside the box and then come up with those elements that really felt like where we ought to be. And the good part about Katrina was that you actually got to re-examine a lot of things that you took for granted and to understand that community engagement was really the important part. We all needed to pitch in and rebuild. So it was fun. The last thing I'll add is that I came back and the staff who had input said, well, wait a minute. I think we do these things a little bit more. The mission statement isn't enough. And they really wouldn't let go of this. So we had another exercise where they developed a statement of purpose. It was a little more tactical, a little more on the ground in terms of running a museum. And they came up with that. So if you go to our website, you can actually see some of the standards that they felt were important, a statement of purpose, as we are as a museum. And then we actually had our overarching legacy, which is the Women's Exchange. So I think everybody got a voice. So it was really a democratic process. And we're all still speaking to each other. So.
And Mamie, I really love the emphasis you placed on looking for those words that really elicit an emotional response. And a couple of our colleagues in the audience have shared some of their education words like excellence, experience, connecting, curious, investigation. I love that our colleague Simone has their mission statement posted for visitors and staff and volunteers right up front, all of them, to see what the museum's about. So Charlie, maybe you can share a little bit about your process.
Okay, I'll jump in here. Oops. Yep, sorry, that was me. That was my museum. I'll go back and peek at this. So we're the state's Natural History Museum. We're part of the Department of Cultural Affairs, and as part of our overall mission, we have 7 other museums within the Department of Cultural Affairs. So again, when I got on board not quite 2 years ago, we were in the process of reaccreditation, and we had some questions from the reaccreditation committee. So I actually was able to walk into a meeting, and it was a diverse group of staff that had come together to answer a number of questions AAM had asked, and they'd proposed the mission statement, and I read it, and it seemed, reasonable. But I just wanted, knowing how fundamentally important these things are, I wanted to really question the group and really work with the group. There's a great book called The Thin Book of Appreciative Inquiry, and it's by Sue Hammond, H-A-M-M-O-N-D. And one of the tenets of appreciative inquiry is that the language we use creates our reality. The language we use creates our reality. And it just, really emphasizes the idea that, gosh, all these words are so important. So as I sat down with the group, I wanted to get a sense of how much they had really thought about each and every word in that mission statement. And so we went through a process, and the process was, number one, let's do some research. And what do these words really mean here? And we looked at things such as, where are the words? What is the definition of natural history? What's the definition of natural heritage? What's physical science? Well, if we want to promote better science education, what's promote? And we really looked hard at words that were in that draft mission statement. And then we just went through a process. Using a draft mission statement as a starting point, we said, okay, now let's look at this. What if we wanted to really look at the fact that, this is about the ends, not the means. It's important to have the means in your mission statement. It's basically the business we do. That is important. But it's really more about the ends, as I've said before, the so what. So we'd look at things about, well, let's look at the ends. Why are we in this? We'd create a long list of, science literacy, pride in our state, encouraging lifelong learning, enrich people's lives. We came up with a whole series of ideas, and then we'd weave those ideas into the draft mission statement. We'd try some new language. So we did that with a number of words. We literally looked at verbs. We looked at nouns. We looked at unidentifiable or technical jargon that might be there. We looked at brevity. Is it too broad? Is it too narrow? Is there anything in here that shows we're unique? So we looked at all those as filters, more or less, and then crafted a statement, that the group eventually found out was a really good statement. And then beyond that, took it to the full staff and had them look at it, give feedback, went back to the small group, took it to the board, and finally had them approve it. And I noticed a question from Sherry. She was asking about, the fact that when you talk about engagement outside the museum's walls, is that synonymous with community outreach? And it can be, yes. And that was an important part. And as we were developing this mission statement, we were also working on our strategic plan. And one of the things we heard through this conversation as we were crafting strategic plan mission statement, we heard many times, you're the New Mexico Museum of Natural History, yet you're doing 90% of your work right here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You need to be broader than that. So we began looking, how can we be more statewide? And in our case, we decided we would do it through partnerships. I could have a fleet of 20 trucks or vans that go out every morning to the corners of the state and do a great program. But guess what? They come home. So we decided from the standpoint of a greater good that we would use our role in the state to partner with other people to promote better science education, natural history, conservation, sustainability. So we're in that process now. So I do think, and I know Daniel said this, it's not just about what goes on in these four walls, but I see that as the strategy piece of it. Once you really craft that statement, then becomes the strategy piece, and how do you go from there? When it was all said and done, it was a statement that we felt good about. Now, as I mentioned, as we develop exhibits and programs, we're saying, well, the word extraordinary is in there. How are these exhibits and programs extraordinary? Let's define that. We say we want to ignite a passion. How are we going to test that? What does it look like when you ignite a passion for lifelong learning? What are the outcomes that would be indicators of that? So those are the conversations we're having now. And that's it, because I went one slide too many.
No, that's okay. And I wanted to, this is Greg, Charlie, I wanted to share with you as somebody who grew up camping with my family in the Jemez Mountains in northern New Mexico, I would certainly have appreciated your approach to that type of community outreach and expansiveness from your museum. So yeah, good for you.
Well, one of the projects we're working on now is a project on the Gila Wilderness, and that's down in southern New Mexico. Well, guess what? We went down to southern New Mexico and had an exhibit development meeting in that community and letting them know, yeah, we're the state's natural history museum, but we're not going to sit up in Albuquerque to try to interpret this part of the state. We need your help. So it was a great opportunity to find new partners to help us achieve that goal.
Cool. Very, very cool. Daniel, your turn.
Okay. There's our slide. And I'm glad you get to see the museum itself. I remember when I first came to Sheldon, I was charged with the prospect of making our museum a little less intimidating. Apparently people felt that we looked like this temple of high modernism, which we are to an extent. And so one of the many things that we had to do was discuss among ourselves, and ourselves included at times staff retreats, retreats with the boards, and I actually have two boards. I have a university advisory board and a community fiduciary board. Interestingly, our collection is owned in part by this community organization and in part, the greater part, by the university. So I have a kind of hybrid museum with, not only this kind of teaching museum mission on the one hand, but also very much a responsibility to the community on the other. So one of the crucial debates that we had was this question of, is Sheldon an American art museum? And this gets to the question of an institution's identity, and that's something that needs to be resolved in a very responsible way, in a very factual way. And so that's why we considered this notion of transnational study, looking at the influences that American artists bring from abroad, foreign-born artists bring to the United States, the great global travel that occurs today in the world, and to see how we can make sense of ourselves in a unique way. And I think this is part of the crucial step in crafting a mission statement. To us at least, it was, how do we distinguish ourselves from other American art museums? And this was one way we could do it. Though other museums, of course, conduct transnational study in some of their exhibitions, no American art museum has identified itself with looking at American art through a transnational perspective. We're the first to do that. That's what helps distinguish us from other museums who have similar collections. That was part of our debate. Another was how to make our museum more accessible to people, a little less intimidating, and inclusive. We feature music series, concerts. We have a Jazz in June festival every Tuesday evening. 5,000 people come to our sculpture garden to hear jazz. Chamber music in our auditorium, a long-standing film series. So we wanted to maintain the idea that the museum is open to multiple kinds of art, and not just the visual art, though that is, of course, our primary function. And our process then was to think about who we are, what we want to do, what our university charge is in terms of complementing its mission in, every research university has a mission to conduct research, teaching, and service. So bringing all of these elements together, the university side, the community side, what a museum, an art museum, is charged with doing, and bringing all this into harmony, that was part of our debates, our discussions over a several months period of time, and then concluding with a statement in 3 steps, a value statement, a vision statement, and a mission statement. And that's the way we broke up the responsibility of really articulating what we are and who we are.
Nice. Thank you, Daniel. And now we'd like to turn to you in our audience. And I know there are several colleagues who are familiar names in our audience. And we'd like to ask you, what are some strategies that you've used in developing your education-focused mission statement that work for your particular organization? And you can just type your responses into that chat box that's on your screen. And while we're letting people respond to that, I wanted to point out Ken Whitworth's question, Ken coming from the Kentucky Historical Society, who wants to know, what is your criteria for an effective partnership? I don't know if that was directed particularly to Charlie, but really for Charlie, Mamie, or Daniel, what makes an effective partnership for your museum?
Well, I'll tell you, for Sheldon Museum, it means it's not a one-off, where you do something with a community organization, whether it's cultural or another kind of nonprofit, and then you're done. Okay, you did that. You can check it off your list. We have, we developed, for example, a relationship with the Vietnamese community in Lincoln, and it's a long-standing relocation community back from the 1970s here in Lincoln, and did an exhibition. We brought in an artist residence to work with the community. We developed a film festival, and then this exhibition by a Vietnamese artist. And this residency, exhibition, and film festival led to the Sheldon then hosting the Tet Festival, which is an annual New Year's festival with the Vietnamese community. And the amazing phenomenon is that when that festival was hosted in the Asian Community Center here in Lincoln, it garnered about 60, 65 visitors who were not a part of the festival themselves. When we hosted it at Sheldon, we got over 650 visitors. And so and now it's an annual event. It was so successful, it's an annual event. So being able to create a relationship, a partnership that has a life after the initial program is the way we look at it.
Yeah, and I can recommend a book. It's called Forces for Good. Forces for Good. It's by Leslie Crutchfield and Heather Grant. And they had written an article out of a Stanford research group. And of course, when you write an article that kind of hits a chord, then you write a book based on the article. If I knew the name of the article or where to get it, I'd recommend it. But they expanded it into a whole book. But it talks about kind of a Jim Collins approach, where they really research people who are really making a big difference, and it has a number of things, a number of things they found from their research about what makes for a good partner. So that's a great resource, and like Daniel said, I don't like the one-off type things either. Is the project you're involved with making both partners stronger, and is it creating bigger impact than you could do on your own? Those are two criteria that I look at all the time. And I tell people when we're having partnership meetings, we'll bring people into the room and say, if this project doesn't make your institution stronger, it may not be right for you, and that's something you need to judge. But we thought you might be interested, and let's go through some ideas. So if it can make them stronger and you can have a much broader impact than a single institution, I think that's a great partnership. And again, a great resource is the book Forces for Good.
I couldn't agree with you guys more. It's all about relationships and building those relationships and reevaluating them from time to time to make sure that everything's there. I have a business background, so I think the idea that good fences make good neighbors, good written documents help everybody understand what's expected, and it has to be mutually beneficial. And with a good exit strategy, because sometimes things just need to stop or need to be reevaluated.
Thank you all, and I'm looking at some of the comments that have come in response to this question about strategies. I particularly like Vonda's first comment talking about involving the people who will actually be educating. As an educator myself, that's one of my soapbox issues is including the people who are going to be involved in making it happen. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward, Vonda. Simone talks about incorporating and aligning with your parent organization. And Daniel, I know that that's an issue for you because you're within a university setting, of course. And Charlie, too, I think, part of a larger state organization.
Correct.
What else do we have here? Oh, Sherry's comment on assessing outcomes, making sure that you have an assessment tool before you put an outcome out there. For me, I often find that there's a vast canyon between what people define as an outcome and an output. But definitely having those assessment tools in place. What else do you all see here that strikes you?
I agree with what you said about Sherry's comment. It's something the field needs to work on, absolutely, about measuring these outcomes in a bigger way and in a deeper way. We all are still really good about reporting our attendance, but we haven't got underneath that a lot. If we have a great funded project with a big grant, you bet there's a great strong evaluation component, but I don't think many of us have institutionalized that process of evaluating. But I do think, in my personal opinion, you need to have the outcome stated first before you know. Then you work on something on how to measure that outcome. So I do think the outcome is probably the egg before the chicken, or the chicken before the egg.
And speaking of egg, I really like Judith's comment about offering free food to undergraduate student audiences.
That's a good Louisiana girl. We're all about the good meal.
Get them where it counts. And I do want to point out that my colleague Jill, who is my counterpart in the museum assessment program, mentions that the organizational map or community engagement map can also be a great tool to use prior to revising your mission statement. So, Jill, thank you for that. Mike, if you could bring that poll question off to the left-hand side and let folks continue, actually the left side, let the folks continue to respond to that question. That would be great. Thank you. And I'd like us to go ahead and move forward a bit. And Donna, bring you back to the stage to talk about the relationship between the mission statement and museum operations.
So you've put in all the hard work, and you've got a fabulous, and to quote some of you in there, a powerful, a moving, engaging mission statement. It's the best mission statement ever. Well, what's next? It's obviously not a standalone document. We've talked about it being the purpose. So integrating the new mission statement into all areas of the institution is key to making is key to make sure it's included in all your planning efforts, policies, documents, and publications. At this point, now that you've done, it would be prudent, as I think we've discussed earlier, for the museum to consider all the other documents that need revision in order to reflect the new mission. These documents can be revised and distributed to key stakeholders. That includes anywhere, that's the board, that's all your staff, that's volunteers. And the revision process can have other outcomes as well. And for instance, the Sheldon Museum of Art, they developed a completely new way of doing business because of their mission review. And I think Daniel's going to share that with us right now.
Okay. Let me just preface this presentation, and it'll be a brief one, by saying that there is always a back and forth, I think, between a statement, a mission statement, and the practice. The mission statement for us needed to reflect what we do, and that gets crafted into our statement. But then the statement allows us to think in new ways, the things that we can do. So there is a kind of back and forth between sort of articulation and practice. And so after the mission statement was crafted, this is just beginning this year, end of last year, we developed a model that helps us rethink how we can manage our affairs, how we can manage our programs and services based on really what comes from the mission. And we're calling it the Transformative Museum. And it's an organizational model that we have developed at Sheldon. And the way we produce this model is to go really back to the very basics of what a museum does, and then figure out how do we transform it from that. So here's a three-step process for what we call transformation and innovation. And the first step is really just to reconsider the basic functions of a museum. Then we follow that by creating a model that reflects those basic functions. So we build on each step. And then the third step is to allow that model to serve as the platform for what we can call 21st century education. It's that basic. And so step one involves reconsidering what the basic function is. And there are three simple questions that we ask ourselves that yield the function. museums hold? Well, they hold collections, of course, of whatever sort. And whom do museums serve? Audiences. And so these are the basic components. We have something, we want to share it with people, and how do we connect those two? Through education programs. So these three questions really get at even the basic approach to crafting a mission statement, identifying who you are, what you have, what you collect, and who you serve. And therein lies that education focus we were talking about. So this is what the three basic functions look like: education and programming, objects and collections, and the people and communities. These are the three components. There is, of course, a glue that has to hold all of these things together, and that is the administration function. And then step two is to create the model, the organizational model, that reflects now these basic functions we just described. And the transformation here is that instead of departments that we have traditionally in museums, we can create a centers model based on these three components. Well, what are these centers? They can be defined as overlapping spheres of activity, so they're not necessarily physical spaces. They concentrate rather on activities, exploring a field of interest, and especially connecting people across what might be the old departmental divisions and communities, right, in pursuit of common objectives. And then the transformation begins within the institution itself. So internally, what happens is that they bring people together. We utilize team-based project management software, for example, drawing on museum-wide participation, working cross-departmentally, leveling the old hierarchies, which always puts exhibitions at the top, and working across departments and units. Improving communication and business efficiency is a really key benefit of doing this. And then the transformation has to extend outward. And we think of that in terms of the services that we provide. And it begins by fostering greater inclusivity and building community collaboration into the very structure, and I'll show you that in a minute. Partnering with other, with non-cultural nonprofits as well as cultural ones, cultivating civic mindedness, demonstrating what we call ethical leadership, institutional ethical leadership, and of course, as I mentioned before, concretizing our relevance in society in these various ways. And so the last step is then to have this model serve then for our educational purposes. And it looks, at Sheldon, it looks like this. We created three centers. The one on the lower left is the Center for Curatorial Initiatives. That's where we study our collections, right? And then the one on the right is the Center for Cultural and Civic Life. And that's the center that accounts for the community. And the one at the top, the Center for Inquiry and Creativity, that's the education function that links the two, our collections with our communities. And at the center, the heart of all of this, is our administration, which we call the stewardship group. And that's the model that we have for the Sheldon Museum. I'll also just quickly mention, for any of you who have parent institutions that are universities, we designed this so that the triangulation there of centers complements the triangulation of research university missions. So the one on the lower left is the research mission. The one at the top is the teaching mission, and the one on the lower right would be the service mission that you would find in any research university. And just to give you a glimpse of how that works with our board, our fiduciary board, we do have the traditional committee structure, and so this is how it breaks down by group, by center and group, what committees. And one thing I'll point out to you, in that second circle, the Center for Cultural and Civic Life, down at the bottom are subcommittees. I mentioned Jazz in June. We have an annual Day of the Dead festival, but there's the TED Festival. So that community collaboration is now built into the structure of the museum's organizational model. And then you see the other governance committees on the far right with stewardship group. And this is the generic model that we can propose. for how it might work at other institutions. And I guess that's it.
Thanks, Daniel. And Daniel, you and I talked about this in our various planning calls, but I really love the model that you presented, and I think it's really a compelling one. I wouldn't suggest that every institution would think like this, but I'm wondering what creating a new model would look like for some of the colleagues in our audience today. I look at this Venn diagram, and it's very similar to a diagram that approached what I came out of graduate school thinking, and that was the visitor-centered museum experience. And so I think your approach to deconstructing departments and silos and hierarchies is really an interesting one. I also like your reference to the 21st century education, or IMLS 21st century skills approach. So just wondering what, if Mamie or Charlie, if you have any thoughts about this, or anybody in the audience, if you want to share your thoughts, please type them into the chat box.
Well, I like the way Daniel, he refers to his areas as centers, and they're centers. And so again, it gets back to the words we use and how they have meaning, because most of us have divisions, and the root word of a division is to divide. And so it's a lot easier, I think, to have cells within an organization that aren't cooperative. And I think this provides an outstanding model that shows our work overlaps some, and it's really focused on, teamwork and broad collaboration. So the idea that your mission statement can spin off on conversations about how do we want to be, how do we want to work together, and then I guess I'll also comment, the idea of transformation was pretty amazing, and that's one of the hardest things to do, is to transform organizations or individuals, so it's a very high goal.
Charlie, thank you for pointing that what I didn't say, that there is an ethic to this, which is to move toward inclusiveness, and departments tend to support division, as you mentioned. And so the idea of a center is that people from different fields, education, operations, can come together on a project-based system.
I think the base of all history knowledge is that compare and contrast model, and I think that it allows you to compare and contrast, but also to find what you have in common with your audience or with your coworkers or with your divisions. And I think that this is just very powerful and inspiring.
And Daniel, I might also add our Leadership and Management Professional Network recently did a survey, and one of the top issues of concern for our museum directors is institutional creativity and innovation and new models for doing such. So I really applaud you for that. Donna, I'm going to turn the stage over to you again to talk for a moment or two before we go into some successes and challenges with folks. Donna.
So thanks, Greg. We want to talk a little bit more about who should be included in the process for developing the mission statement. And when you see on there the list of people who should be included, and I just want to add for staff, we of course mean education can consist of people from different functions of the museum. Many times the team incorporates members of the governing authority and staff, but a smaller group is usually more productive than a larger one, as I think everyone can probably agree. Greater feedback is encouraged. The team's responsibility is to facilitate the process, identify the key stakeholders, and use feedback to shape what will eventually become the mission. Those leading the review must ensure that the development end results are effective. The team should be authorized by the governing authority to report to the governing authority. So this should be an authorized team, and everybody should be on board with who they are. So then you are done, and you're not done. You're never done, basically. There is a periodic review and revision. Missions may evolve as a museum does, and therefore they need to be reviewed from time to time. Most importantly, missions must be practiced. Mission statements are really only useful if they're being realized every day. Otherwise, why did you go through this tremendous exercise? A museum reviewing its mission statement might consider reasons for review and how long it has been since the mission was changed. A mission statement is usually revisited or revised when changes arise. Institutional planning, applying for accreditation, shifting audiences served, etc. Since it can evolve over time, it is important for it to be nimble enough to bend and move with.
So let's turn it back to our presenter colleagues again and spend just a moment or two on successes and challenges. Obviously our program is talking about your mission statement and then operationalizing it. What are some of the successes or challenges that each of you have faced in going through this process at your institutions? Mamie, maybe we could start with you.
Sure, that's great. I wanted to point out, we've talked a lot about wordsmithing, and this isn't a semantic exercise. It really does give voice to some really amazing, creative young voices. And one of our success stories is that in our strategic planning and our mission statement development process, we had a bright young person on staff who was contemplating going off to grad school or staying at a museum, our museum. She recognized the idea that we kept talking about respecting the legacy of the women who owned and operated our museums. And in more discovery, one of the things that the ladies had done before they opened the museum was owned a chaperone boarding house for ladies and a consignment shop. So ladies could sell a Christian Women's Exchange or a Women's Exchange that exists today. So we were feeling a little broke and went forward, and so she wrote a white paper on her own and said, why don't we start a consignment shop, but let's tap into the artist community that emerged post-Katrina, and it would speak to our mission, educating women artists, local women artists, to show their work in a gallery-like setting, basically replacing our gift shop, so no investment in inventory anymore. And we can help these women start a business of selling their work. So there are some established artists, but there are also some women who have never shown their work before. So we're making money. That's the bottom line.
Thanks, Mamie. Charlie, what are your thoughts on successes or challenges in your process?
Yeah, like Mamie, the success is to have multiple voices involved, because it's not my mission statement. It's our mission statement, and I can run off the road tomorrow and hopefully not die, but get sent to the hospital for months, and people will carry on because this is their work. It's not my work. And the biggest challenge we're facing now is that the revisiting mission let us know how much we weren't doing. And so one of our just biggest challenges right now is that there's so much to do that if we can't prioritize it, it'll probably kind of paralyze us a little bit. We'll do a lot of stuff really just average. So I'm trying to figure out now how to take that mission statement in the strategic plan that kind of blossomed out of that. And there are many things we don't do well, and that'll be my challenge here over the next 3 years, is to get agreement on how we can truly fulfill our mission statement, and not just get paralyzed by all the work we're not doing. Somebody told me over the weekend, they said, busy is the new lazy. Busy is the new lazy. And
oh, no.
And it's a matter of people running around everywhere in a craze, and that's just poor leadership. And I think right now, 6 months after our strategic plan is out there, I see a lot of running around, and that's poor leadership on my part. So prioritizing becomes that next step to try to add focus and pull off this mission statement.
Busy is the new lazy. I'm going to have to remember that one. Wow, goodness. Daniel, so thoughts from your corner about successes and challenges?
I think for us, the whole process has helped us to congeal even our sense of motivation for serving our communities. Because that's part of the debate that we had. And to be able to undergo this process, it helps bring to everybody's mind not only what we are, which a statement articulates, but really our hopes and vision, and sort of to re-energize our sense of mission. So there's two parts to that, right? Mission statement. The statement is something that just sort of sits there, it's solid. But a mission also has a kind of active charge. And so the process in reviewing all of this helps us as well to re-energize our sense of our charge and that aspect of a mission. And I think that's been really reinvigorating. This is our 50th anniversary of the Philip Johnson building. Our history goes back to 1888. But it's come at a crucial time. We really are thinking about how to do things in a new way. So we use this process really to help energize ourselves as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Donna, I think that you have a list of resources that would be really helpful for our audience. So I'm going to jump right to those. And as Donna goes through those, if you all have any lingering questions for us, please feel free to type them into the chat box. Donna.
All right. So the resources are on your screen. One of them is standards, and you can get to that through the link there. And through the bookstore. Another resource is on our website. You can go to our website under the Resources tab, and there you'll find the Continuum of Excellence and links from there to the core document. There's many levels of assessments on there that you can explore, and I urge you to explore the entire Continuum of Excellence. There's a lot to drill down there. There's also online resources through the core documents. So when you go to the core documents page on our website, under each of the core documents, for example, mission statement, you will see links to actual resources that will help you, guide you through the exercises discussed through the course of this webinar. And the bookstore, of course, has many resources and references that you can use, and we encourage you to explore those as well. And then finally, I think if you've had enough of specifically the mission statement, there's always the next core document, because we said there's 5 core documents, and the next core document series webinar, and I believe that's November 6th, and it's on the required elements for institutional planning.
Indeed it is. Thank you, Donna. And of course, we have several webinars in our recorded webinar library that are related to this topic, and you can find those online on the resources section of our website in online learning. And we hope that you'll take advantage of those. And of course, with this particular program, if you weren't able to catch all of it, or you feel like you'd like to share it with your staff members, of course, this program is recorded, and we'll be sending that link out to you after this program. I do want to remind you, and many of you already know this because you are participating as AAM members, that Alliance membership is probably one of the best resources we can think of. And you can learn more about the different tiers of institutional membership as well as individual membership by visiting our website. And many of you already know that one of the benefits of membership is our information center that gives you a number of resources, both 24/7 online resources as well as customized research services and sample documents and other things that might be of use to you in thinking about your mission and your strategic planning at your institution. I do want to take a moment, and we'll just pause and see if there's any other questions or comments that anybody has. But I do want to pause and thank our colleagues at Learning Times for being great producers, and in particular, Mike, thank you for manning the ship so ably today. And of course, I want to reach out and thank all of our guests, our colleagues, for being a part of this program. Mamie, Daniel, and Charlie, I think you've all presented really interesting and unique perspectives from your parts of the museum field. So thank you very much for giving of your time. And of course, Donna, thank you for leaping in. I know that you are very interested in this topic in your role in accreditation, so thank you so much. So, Mike, do you see any other questions that have come in from our colleagues?
No, there are no other questions at this time.
Great. Well, with that, this is Greg Stevens, Assistant Director for Professional Development here at the American Alliance of Museums, thanking all of you for joining us for this program today, and we'll see you next time. Have a terrific afternoon.